So I always think it's good to get different viewpoints, particularly on Brexit, and this one is coming from the continent. And this is how the Dutch are falling out of love with Britain. So, growing up as a Northern European citizen in the 1980s and the early 90s, the world was so much simpler. The European Union consisted of only 12 countries, and you were a traitor to the EU economy if you bought a Japanese manufactured car, and most of all, you hated everything German. From here in the Netherlands, you were taught to look for inspiration and ideas westbound, not east. Don't believe Dutch people who say they never showed a German who asked for directions the wrong way. We all did. Being a granddaughter of a primary school teacher who lost all her Jewish pupils during the war, I was brought up with a strong anti-German sentiment. We took pride in making fun of the Germans. A highlight was in 1988 when Holland beat Germany at the semi-finals of the European Football Championship, and the Dutch defender Ronald Koeman wiped his bum with Olaf Ton's shirt in front of the Germans' fans. The Germans were taught we were the outcasts of Europe, loud, rude and clunky, a sentiment that ran deep. A mere sound of a tourist speaking German would cause agitation. What a different view we had of our neighbours over the sea to the west, civilised, polite and kind. The British, they were the people we related to. We were told, of course, they had their peculiarities. Living on an island, they had developed some strange habits. They drank lukewarm beer and ate tinned beans on toast, but still we felt culturally close and we share the same sense of humour. In fact, we actually looked up to the British. Their music, their writers, their actors. If you want to make an impression at work, you would mention in passing that you had seen the latest episode of Yes Minister on the BBC. And you could always score points by impersonating John Cleese and his Fawlty Towers Don't Mention the War line. Hopelessly stereotypical, of course, but these strong images stuck in our continental minds. Fast forward 20 years and you can still boast by citing a British author or by saying you saw Newsnight the other night. But things do seem to be changing. The aversion of my generation felt towards the Germans has dissolved over the last 10 years, and younger generations now feel more and more connected to our neighbours to the east. With the UK's decision to leave Europe, the natural connection and understanding we Northern Europeans felt towards Britain is in danger of slowly drifting away, and it's not for the first time. Throughout our history, our bond with the UK has had its ups and downs. It wasn't very amicable during the 17th and 18th century. During 4 Anglo-Dutch wars, we fought each other at sea over trade and overseas colonies. It got better during the 18th century when Napoleon was defeated and the Dutch statesman Gilsbert Karel von Hoogdorp, I think that's how you say it, declared Britain our natural ally. But that natural alliance vanished in the 19th century during the two Boer Wars in South Africa, and the tide turns again during the 20th century. The Second World War changed the relationship for good. Britain offered shelter to the Dutch Queen Wilhelmina and to the Dutch government. Most of our ships of the Royal Dutch Marine were safeguarded in England, and a few Dutch pilots who managed to flee the Netherlands joined the RAF and fought in the Battle of Britain. The most famous resistance hero, Eric Hanselhoff, who was better known as the Soldier of Orange, joined the RAF in 1942, not before bluffing his way through an eye test which he never should have passed as he actually needed glasses. And of course the British played an important cultural role in liberating the Netherlands from German occupation. The bond shaped during those war years stuck over and over the last decades and expanded on in many different levels. In business, multinationals like Shell and Unilever joined forces. On the military level, the British and Dutch Royal Marines formed an alliance, though our men do have to live with the British calling them cloggies. They are too using stereotypes, implying that we still walk on wooden clogs all day. On a royal level, our King William Alexander is the 850th successor in line to the British throne. And in politics, the Dutch always found a close ally in Britain when it came to NATO and the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and until recently in the European Union. In European life, we value the British Dutch axis. The Germans are too rigid and the French are too statist. The British are the ones who we are most in tune with, and when it comes to monetary policy, we also see Europe mainly as an economic project, but never and not ever as a closer political union. So again, a lot of these Brexiteers, particularly Sargon, for example, continually saying, "Oh, it's going to end up in a political union." We don't want it. We could have vetoed it. The Dutch don't want it. They could have vetoed it. And I guarantee you there are a lot of other countries that probably don't want that actual, super state and would veto it. So our current Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, is a self-declared Anglophile. Pre-Brexit, he would openly gush over his UK counterpart, David Cameron, and openly declare his love for England. He likes to read books on British politics, and in his speeches he often uses English words. We make fun of it, but at the same time, we don't mind. 80% of us speak English as a second language. A lot of us have studied English through cultural exchange programs or worked for a few years on the other side of the channel. During these times, we have built friendships and relationships with Britain and experiences which we have absorbed and took back home. Then came the shock result and vote for Brexit. In the run-up to the referendum, the comparison of Brexit with the divorce had so often been made. There were merely words then, but not anymore. As a country, we felt rejected by an ally who we admired and trusted. It wasn't personal, we were told, but it did feel that way. Rutte has said that he hates Brexit from every angle. He also says that he hopes there will be some form of UK membership or relationship with the internal market. But his tone has clearly now changed. The amicable relationship that Rutte shared with Cameron has been replaced by a cautious and calculated approach towards Theresa May, as had the view of the UK chief Frans Timmermans, another Dutch Anglophile, who recently mocked Britain's vision of a post-Brexit world by comparing British politician to Monty Python's Black Knight. Until recently, Dutch politicians wouldn't publicly make fun of their British counterparts, but now they're seeking new allies. If people talk about the French-German axis, then I think, what about the French-Dutch axis? Rutte said recently. I want to help shape Europe, and you need alliances for that. But what about the alliance between ordinary Dutch and British people? Ask a Dutchman if he will still prefer to share a beer with an Englishman over a German. We might not laugh at the German anymore, but laughing with them is, for a lot of Dutch, too much to ask. But it's not hard to imagine that we will eventually shift our focus to Germany and France in the event of a hard Brexit, not at least because it will be easier to study in an EU member state because of multinationals will be forced to move from London to Frankfurt on Paris. Of course, we won't suddenly cut off friendship, discard British literature and not laugh about the understated humour we love so much. The admiration we felt for many decades is fading. When a partner unilaterally ends a relationship, you automatically start to scrutinise that relationship. The things you used to love about each other and party about are no longer so enduring. you see things differently and weigh them up differently. Boris Johnson is an example. When the UK was still part of the European team in the period before Brexit, we thought he was a charismatic and strong politician, and that he could get away with the gaffes he made. We would even wonder why we didn't have these colourful, eloquent people in Dutch politics, but since Brexit, he jokes suddenly don't land on the same line the way they used to. His humour makes him look like a clown. That was first seen as funny. Now it's seen as insensitive and very gauche coming from a foreign minister. Angela Merkel, on the other hand, used to be mocked for being boring, stern, and unaccountable. But in recent years, Mutti has become popular amongst us continentals. In a world that is becoming more and more complex, we value a leader that takes problems we face seriously. The difference with her British counterpart, Theresa May, couldn't be greater. She is seen as a leader who uses big but alternately meaningless phrases, like Brexit means Brexit, and who claims to be strong and stable but can't deliver. She is weak and wobbly and making Britain look messier every day. The mess that is starting to become the new status quo has, as an outsider, it seems British politicians are leading their people blindly towards the edge of a cliff. There might be a master plan that we can't see, but it doesn't feel that way. As an abandoned partner, there comes a point where you just don't understand it anymore and you start to lose respect. One of the things we always used to admire in the Brits was their understated humour and the ability to make fun of themselves. But to be able to do that, you need to be taken seriously. And the decision that Britain has been taking over the last year, they are very hard to be taken seriously. So that was by Vanessa Lamsvelt, and she is the Brexit correspondent for Evening Van der Gun. It's a news and current affairs programme on Dutch national television. So that's what the Dutch now think of us. They now think of us as, well, a complete laughingstock. And I'm sure, in coming weeks, I'm sure we'll be able to find some other views of Brexit from other countries. But, yeah, there you go. Our closest ally in Europe. Again, the Dutch now saying, if you leave, we're not going to support you when you're out. And as I've said before, a union of 27 countries is stronger than one country alone. And that about sums it up, really.